Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight. We'll look at what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now, today I want to talk about the two major geopolitical groupings apart from the BRICS, the G7 and the G20. In the global political scene, there's three major groupings. The oldest is the G7, and it was established at the behest of France in the aftermath of the first Middle East oil crisis in 73-74. Its inaugural summit was convened in Rambouillet in 1975 with the participation of 6 countries: France, Germany, the United Kingdom, United States, Italy, Japan. Later Canada joined them. Now, it was supposed to represent the 7 largest economies in the world, hence the name Great Seven. But that's no longer the case, and it's now actually the US Vassals Club, which is similar to an economic NATO. I mean, 3 of the world's top 4 economies by purchasing power parity, which are China, India and Russia, are not members, so it's hardly the world's great 7 economies anymore. Now then there's the G20. It was founded in 1999 following the Asian financial crisis and meltdown as a forum for finance ministers and central bank governors to discuss and plan global economic and financial issues. However, it has now morphed into a major summit of the leaders of the real major economies of the world, particularly those in the developing world, in Asia, Latin America, and in Asia particularly Indonesia and Vietnam, with Brazil and Latin America. Now the third major grouping is the BRICS, which you are all aware of. The concept was established in 2006 in the group of Brazil, Russia, India, China's foreign policy. The third summit in South Africa became a member, and that became BRIC to BRICS. Now, since January 2024, Egypt, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates and Iran have all joined, with Saudi Arabia acting in observer status. And from 2025, another 13 countries now have partner status. So BRICS is now one of the most diverse groupings and powerful groupings. It gives a voice and interaction for the emerging economies of Asia and Africa. Now all of these groups have an annual summit and one country gets the rotating presidency. So let's look at what's likely to happen this year and what are the agendas of each of the countries hosting the events. Now let's start with the G70s. The host is Canada. It has the presidency, which is less aligned with Russia's interests compared with Italy last year. So what can we expect from Canada's presidency? Well, the 51st summit, which will bring together the leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Great Britain and the United States, will be held in the resort town of Kanasakis in Alberta. Now it's noteworthy that the 28th meeting of the group was held there in 2002, with Russia participating at that time. Obviously, following the reunification of Crimea with Russia, the 8 became back to the 7. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, SCOBRICSinsight.com, to further develop it. And you can do this by making a small donation, which is done by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now. Now, the Canadian Summit will be the first event in this format for 3 new politicians: the British Prime Minister Sir Juan Keir Starmer, his Japanese counterpart Shigeru Ishiba, and Donald Trump in his second presidency, although he's been at some before, obviously, in his first presidency. However, the analyst community believes that the change in the leader composition of the G7's presidency is unlikely to significantly alter the content of the summit. I mean, it's not anticipated that Canada's presidency will result in any significant alterations to the G7 agenda, including its international tack. Now, given its informal nature as a forum for leading developed countries, now 7 have seen a very substantial decline in their international influence in recent years, particularly with the emergence of the G20, the Big 20, which in addition to the key developed countries also includes prominent developing countries. Now, the viewpoint expressed by Evgeny Smirnov, who's a head of the Department of World Economy and International Relations at Russia's Higher School of Economics, Ottawa's historical animus towards Moscow is pretty well known. I mean, the recently departed Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, was seriously Russophobic to the point Look, it was well known she was the granddaughter of a real-life World War II Nazi who was the editor of a Third Reich newspaper. So that suggests that Canada's G7 presidency, the Ukraine situation, is likely to remain on the agenda. Now, Freeland, who resigned recently after a spat with the uber-liberal Justin Trudeau, was formerly the Financial Times correspondent in Moscow, and my path with her crossed frequently at press conferences, etc. I nicknamed her seaweed, as even the tide would not take her out, and she hung out on the periphery with the other Western harpies while we partied on with the gorgeous Russian girls. Anyway, this will certainly impact financing. At the end of the 2024, the G7 leaders agreed on the details of providing the Ukraine with a $50 billion loan. Now, that's expected to receive the amount in 2025, and each country will allocate a loan in accordance with its economic capabilities, and the repayment will be secured by interest on the frozen Russian assets. Now, Russia has repeatedly, obviously, denounced such proposals by these Western countries as illegal, and it is. It's downright theft. However, these proposals might be intended to just be demonstrative, especially in the run-up to Donald Trump's return to the White House, which is expected he's going to try and resolve the Ukraine conflict. I mean, he's reiterated his stance on numerous occasions, both prior and following his election as president. I mean, he said that he will discuss the settlement with Vladimir Putin after the Russian leader said that they would try and meet on a direct line on December the 19th during his conversation with the Russian people. Now, this is indicative of a signal nature, raising the stakes in possible bargaining. It's also assumed that each member of the seven will make independent contributions to the Common Fund for Emergency Loans. Now, in 3 European countries, France, Italy and Germany, this is going to prove problematic due to the domestic political situation and the elite's doubt about the advisability of such steps. Now, that's according to Ivan Losharev, who's a professor of political theory at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Higher School of Economics. Now, at the same time, it's improbable because of the inertial support for Ukraine that it's going to have a significant impact on the situation on the ground. Now, according to Yevgeny Smirnov, Canada and the other G7 are likely to abstain from trying to solve Kiev's problems due to the complete fatigue and the number of contradictions between the G7 members in regards to the ways to resolve the conflict. I mean, while the US, Canada and Great Britain have a similar stance in regards to Russia, some European countries, notably Germany and Italy, are pursuing a more balanced policy. Notably, Berlin has not approved the delivery of long-range missiles. Japan, on the other hand, maintains an almost neutral stance based on its own legislation, although it has imposed some sanctions on Russia and does provide some limited assistance to Kiev. Now, the G20 presidency will then be transferred to a country that still has a friendly relationship with Russia. And that's the 4th consecutive year that a G20 presidency has been held by a Russia-friendly nation. Despite that Ottawa has already announced it will fight against the circumvention of sanctions and the shadow fleet, and it will also advocate for measures to ensure security at sea and avoid protect underwater infrastructure. Now, South Africa will align with Brazil's approach, focusing on food security in the G20 and seeking to establish a consensus to resolve conflicts in the Ukraine and the Middle East. I mean, these are pertinent questions regarding the anticipated agenda of South Africa within the global context. I mean, alongside the G7, there's another expanded format, the G20, and Russia works fully with it, and it's been rotated with countries friendly to Russia. In 2022 it was Indonesia, in 2023 it was India, Brazil in 2024, and now it's South Africa. And given South Africa's role, it's improbable that an anti-Russian agenda is going to be adopted. Notably, South Africa is not only a Russia-friendly nation, but it's also a BRICS member, along with India and Brazil. And as Svetlana Lukash, the Russian Sherpa at the G20, emphasised at the end of last year, South Africa's priorities fully meet the interests of Russia and their mutual benefit. Now, in the South African presidency calendar for the summit. It includes over 130 meetings in various formats. Now, the foreign ministers are scheduled to meet twice in 2025, on the 21st and 22nd of February in Johannesburg, and in September again during the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, the summit is scheduled for November. Now, South Africa has identified 3 key areas of work for itself within the BRICS, South Africa G20. It's economic growth, food security, artificial intelligence, and innovation for sustainable development. At the G20 summit in Brazil, the leader of the African state, Cyril Ramaphosa, articulated the motto for its presidency as promoting solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. Now, in light of the ongoing debt crisis on the African continent, Pretoria is going to prioritise efforts to alleviate that debt burden. Plus, because of the escalating debt crisis in the continent and the volatility of the global commodities market, South Africa is going to advocate for the formulation of long-term effective debt management strategies. Now, these strategies aim to enhance the financial and economic sustainability of the best developed and least developed countries in Africa. I mean, over the past decade, interest payments on developing countries' debt have increased by more than 60%, and in the African countries it's more than 130%. I mean, such dynamics significantly limit the opportunities for investment and economic growth, according to Vianney Smirnov. Concurrently, South Africa will not be proposing Brazil's global 2% tax on the super rich. The host country believes the task currently faces enough obstacles. Plus, searching for solutions on the Ukraine will possibly be on the agenda, as long with the Middle East. I mean, South Africa has set itself the objective of achieving consensus on the most significant geopolitical issues and bringing them to a discussion in the G20. How it's unlikely that Vladimir Putin's going to take place there. Because of the usual political spats around the International Criminal Court, South Africa is basically saying that it would be better if he just joined and sent Lavrov on and joined via video conference. Anyway, so that's how the BRICS is happening. And of course the BRICS summit is now, next year, is now going to be in Brazil, which had the G20 summit last year. So it's all looking pretty good, and it shows that the BRICS summit has now taken a greater precedence than the G20, and it certainly controls a lot more of the population of the global economic situation. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you all again soon.